In just about 5 days, marijuana becomes legal in Canada, but drug-impaired driving is still very much a crime. The government's Bill C-46 is supposed to ensure stoned drivers are caught and convicted, but an Ontario man in the pot business claims the law is flawed, and he plans to challenge it in court. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is here with that story. Hey, Catherine, thanks for being here.
Hey,
what can you tell us about this?
Well, this is somebody who has made a fair bit of money off pot, and now he's going to use some of that money to help fund this legal challenge. I'm talking about Chuck Rifici. People may know him as one of the people who helped start the cannabis producer Tweed, now one of the really big players in the licensed producer world. He's moved on. He's with a cannabis investment company called Auxley, but still in this world of investing in marijuana, making money off of it. And he says he has some very serious concerns about this piece of legislation, C-46, namely, and this is something that we have heard from other experts, certainly over the course of the time that we've been talking about marijuana and impairment, that there isn't a clear correlation between the level of THC in your blood. THC, of course, is the chemical in marijuana that's associated with a high or a feeling of intoxication. There's not a clear correlation between that level and whether or not you're actually impaired. However, the government did set forward 3 new criminal offenses that have to do with how much THC is in your blood. So he has been speaking to lawyers. He says he's going to be talking to other people in the cannabis industry, asking them to put some money up too. He's getting ready to launch this legal challenge. Let's hear it from Chuck Rifici.
We now have a law that can apply criminal charges to some way, a completely arbitrary line. And so that's my issue with it. I think for medical patients, it's a requirement that this be changed, but for the recreational user, it's still important, and why I think it's for the average Canadian as well. You know, if you enjoy cannabis, I think as many Canadians will, let's say on a Friday night, you shouldn't be worried on Monday morning when you are completely 100% not impaired with cannabis. You shouldn't be worried about driving to work on the Monday morning.
Interesting to note, too, he's not just somebody involved in the marijuana sector. He is also the former treasurer of the Liberal Party of Canada. So I did ask him about the fact that if this court challenge does indeed go ahead, he's taking a Liberal government to court. He said, that's politics.
What is the government saying?
Well, they are, as you might imagine, standing by their legislation. I sent in a request to Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould's office. They sent back a statement in which she says that she checked this piece of legislation. She has ensured that it complies with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They put forward a charter compliance statement as well. And she also says, again, something that she has repeated many times, that they believe that this piece of legislation is going to save lives. I did want to check with somebody else, though, because we're talking about questions of science here. Wanted to get an expert to weigh in on these questions around THC levels in your blood and what it has to do with whether or not you are indeed impaired. So let's hear from Dr. Andrea Furlan. She's part of the University Health Network in Toronto.
I wish it was that easy to determine like a threshold and say if you're above this threshold, you cannot drive because you're impaired. But unfortunately, there might be people who are below that threshold and they are impaired, and people who might be above and they may not be.
And the reason she is sitting in a car doing that interview is because she actually works in a simulation lab where they put people through tests to see what their level of impairment is, obviously in a safe and controlled environment. She is actually working on different ways of testing this. She really feels that blood is not the way to do it, that it's people's behavior, and that is the way that police used to test for these kinds of things. And in fact, largely what they're still doing throughout the country right now, right, is checking your coordination and things like that, rather than resorting to these blood tests.
Okay, thanks a lot, Catherine. The CBC's Catherine Cullen. So do provinces share these concerns about drug-impaired driving and the country's ability to monitor it? And what other issues still need to be addressed? Joining me now from Vancouver is BC Solicitor General Mike Farnworth. Hi, Minister Farnworth. Nice to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Minister, first on what we were just talking about with Catherine, with my colleague Catherine Cullen, do you think the federal government's new drug-impaired driving laws will hold up in court?
Well, to that I have to defer to the Justice Minister, who feels confident that they will. I mean, we have raised concerns about the technology that has been approved by the federal government. And what I can tell you that here in British Columbia, a number of police departments have indicated that they will not be using that technology at this time.
Is that the Drager test? Sorry to interrupt.
That is correct, the Drager test. And they will be using the standard field sobriety drug recognition test, which they currently use, and that they intend to continue using that. I would also add, though, that given, and we have fully anticipated right from the get-go with the passage of Bill C-46, that the very first time that the new technology is used and that somebody is charged and using it, there will be a court challenge. So that does not come as a surprise to us.
Does it factor into your plans, I guess, or does it factor into planning for drug-impaired driving? Or are you anticipating, for example, an increase?
We're hoping not to see an increase. I know that the Premier BC met yesterday with the Governor of Washington, and cannabis was on the agenda. And the experience out of Washington State has indicated so far they have not seen a significant increase or an increase in impaired driving. What's important to us is that police have tools available to them, and they have tools right now, and that's why so many in BC have said they're going to stick with the standard field sobriety and drug recognition expert tests that we have at present. What we want to ensure is that we have police trained in those, and that we have enough drug recognition experts in British Columbia, and I expect other provinces will as well, to ensure that when impaired drivers are found, that they are taken off the road, and in a way that will pass muster.
Sorry about that. Are police they're going to be using blood tests? I just spoke with Ottawa Police today, for example, and they don't have a nurse on staff to administer those blood tests to actually measure the concentration of THC in the blood. Will police forces in BC be equipped to handle those?
It will vary from police force to police force. We have in a number of municipalities in this province, we have municipal police forces, and then we also have the RCMP. But the key to everything right now is that standard field sobriety test and drug recognition experts, which are currently, able to deal with impaired driving at the present time.
Okay, switching topics a little bit, but picking up on what you said about the Premier meeting with the Governor of Washington State. Yesterday, there was news essentially from the U.S. government that you won't be refused entry if you disclose that you're investing or you work for a marijuana company, as long as you're not going across the border to then do marijuana-related business. Given that Washington State also has legalized marijuana, are you concerned about that?
I'm actually quite relieved with what the U.S. federal government posted yesterday, that those involved in the legal cannabis industry in this country, in British Columbia, are able to travel to the United States, that they will be admissible. I mean, they have made it clear that you can't go down there on cannabis-related business. And I think people understand that. And it's also important from us here in BC, particularly given the fact that we know we will have a sizable industry, that a lot of people have been very concerned about this from the business side, from the employee side, because we will have government as well as private retail outlets, and there has been a lot of concern about that. And we raised it with the federal government, and I'm very pleased that the federal government has in fact pursued this and got the U.S. to in fact clarify the position that people engaged in what will be a legal activity and a legal business enterprise on the 17th will not have to worry about the border if they're going down and they're asked what kind of business they're in. It's not going to be an impact as long as they're not going to do cannabis-related business. So that's very important news for us.
Isn't it possible, though, that if you are involved in the business in BC and you go across the border, that you would be going to Washington State on some kind of business? I imagine just if you're talking about any border crossing, that would be the big one, right?
The real issue is what's the purpose of the visit? And so Washington State cannabis is legal. It is legal in Oregon. But the reality is that a lot of that expertise, a lot of the businesses based here in Canada are working, across the country. They've been seeking clarity. This provides a great deal of that. It's a great first step. I expect that this is going to continue to evolve over time as more and more states in the U.S. Do legalize cannabis, but it is a huge improvement over the situation and the concern that we had a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I had individuals coming to me who had planned to open retail outlets, for example, saying that they were pulling back because they had investments in the United States, because they were concerned about what would happen at the border. So this is very good news.
Speaking of those retailers, can I ask you to clarify for certain, will there be only one government-run store open as of October 17th and no private stores?
On October 17th, there will be one government-run store in Kamloops. There will also be the government online retail portal, which will be up and running. There won't at this time be private stores, but there are, we've had 173 applications paid applications that are currently going through the process. As you're probably aware, we're also right smack in the middle of local government elections, which occur 3 days after legalization. And many municipalities have done a lot of groundwork and have said that after the elections, then you're going to start to see them dealing with those private retail as well as further government stores. So you're going to see a ramping up.
Yeah, is there a timeline though that you'd like to see, given that there are concerns across the country about supply being able to meet demand?
Well, right now we are confident that we have the supply to meet the demand. With the store opening in Kamloops and the online portal. I think we're in a similar situation as to other provinces, that we know that legalization is going to take place on Wednesday. I don't think anyone's really sure about how much demand there is going to be. We've been told by some of the major cannabis producers that there may well be a shortage. But I also know that here in British Columbia, we have had a number of smaller scale producers that have stepped up. And so when legalization occurs on Wednesday, we will actually have in BC the largest variety of cannabis products of any province in the country.
But if you're not sure exactly what demand will be, how can you be sure supply will meet it?
Well, we're confident with what we've got that we will be able to meet that supply, that demand. And we also know that there is a lot more supply coming on stream. And as the major players themselves have told us that. And at the same time, we are confident from what we are already receiving from those smaller producers in British Columbia that we will have the supply to meet the initial demand, and the supply will be there as more stores open up in BC, whether they're government stores or retail stores.
What's the earliest you see another store, either private or government run, coming online then?
As I said, it's going to depend on the local government elections and how quickly things move after that. I know that there are a number of applications that have gone through municipal process that are going through the background checks that the province is doing to ensure that there's no criminal activity or criminal involvement. And so, I expect over the next few months that you will see additional stores opening up, and it will ramp up and it will escalate after that over the next several months. And I've been quite public that it is going to take a couple of years before we have a fully mature retail system of government and private stores in our province.
Okay, thank you so much, Minister Farnworth. Great to see you again.
My pleasure.